These videos were created for you to watch along. They'll teach you about client tracks so you know what's going on. So best of luck with all of your data. Now here's your HMIS system administrator.
Hi everyone. In this section, we'll be going through different privacy options. So clients have several options to choose from, if or when they decide to share. We'll go through the functional use cases as well as some examples in the system. First, let's recap on some basic concepts. When you sign into the system, you're always signed in under an organization. Sometimes this is referred to as agency or security organization. We're talking about the same thing. You can tell what organization you're logged in under by hovering over your name on the top right. That first row there says I am signed in under my training organization. And whenever we mark something as restrict to org, we're talking about restricting data so that just those logged in as the agency who created it can see it. So, and when we talk about sharing something to MOU, we're talking about sharing to organizations that are part of the MOU. And currently in Georgia HMIS, we just have the single share to all MOU. Second, when you're signed in, you are signed in with your specific account with its own user ID. The system will always display data that you entered. So for those of you who enter data under multiple organizations, this is something you'll have to keep in mind as you're switching back and forth between them. Now there's a difference between transactional data like enrollments or services and the client record itself, so being able to search for them and navigate to the client record. The client record restriction, so being able to search for it, being able to open up other transactions, is under Edit Client and Information Release. We'll go there in just a second. Again, this controls the ability for other people to search, to prevent duplicate records, to use the same record, as well as act as one of the main gatekeepers of being able to open up and see other transactional data that's shared to the MOU. Now for the transaction restrictions, meaning enrollment services, it's anywhere you see this plugin where it's a restrict to org or restrict to MOU on an individual service or assessment or enrollment. You are setting the restriction again just for that specific piece of data. So for this service, it's marked restrict to org. Only those who are logged in as my training organization, regardless of the client sharing information on the client record MOU, will be seen. Also, as a reminder, case notes, barriers, and all transactions from protected agencies are defaulted as strict to org and are not shared. For some of the different use cases that are coming in for the client record, so for existing clients, say they're already entered in the system, the typical use case for one is I am coming into the agency. That's fine if people know that I exist, they can search for me, but I don't really want to open up any transaction information, where I'm enrolled or where I'm being served. So for that, we just keep something at share and take globally. We mark save. So now if someone wants to search for this client, they'll be able to see it, but they would only be able to view the data that was logged either by yourself, so I logged all of these services, or logged under that particular organization. Next is if we are opening up the client record, so meaning client comes in and says, yes, you can share my information, that's fine. We're marking that as share and take to the MOU, and are inputting the name of the information release, or the number of the information release, I'm sorry, and that's going to be 1 for us. That's the only one we have to worry about. So we click save. Now if we were to search, that's opened up. Everything that's marked as restrict to MOU for services, other people can see. But again, anything that's marked restrict to org is separate from that. It'll still be protected. So if there are clients who say that in general, I don't mind sharing, but there's just one piece of information I don't want to share. So for example, if the client says, I don't want anyone to know that I don't want to share that I'm receiving assistance for VA benefits for healthcare. For each specific service or assessment or enrollment, you can mark that piece of information as restrict to org. So this is the restriction for some data, and you'll just have to mark that appropriately. As well, if they want to open things up later, so not necessarily for protected organizations, but if they're in services and it's, I don't really mind if people see, my past data, you can open these up to restrict to MOU. So notice that there's no share global for services. So it's basically you're sharing to the MOU or you're just restricting it to the organization. If you have a brand new client that comes in and they want zero sharing whatsoever, you have to, on clicking Project Intake, add a new client. You'll have to create what looks like a duplicate record. My mash keys here. I'll short circuit the workflow here a little bit. You have to create the additional client record because that's the only way you know that you created the record. If it's already in the system, someone else likely created it. So we did the intake, we did add a new client, and now I'm marking that as restrict to organization. So this means that just persons logged in under this organization, or obviously your own user account, will be able to search for this client record and will be able to use this client record. Last, if a client refuses to consent to participate in research, for that we're going to use this document check feature. We're going to add a new document check. And the checklist we're looking for is opts out of research. And there is really only one option currently right now. So you can just mark it in the document check. You can also upload the file if it's scanned in. So by just saying this person opts out of research, this is telling the system, this is telling everyone in the future who's looking at it, this client does not consent to be included in any type of research. So to recap what we covered, we looked at several different sharing scenarios, just some key reminders. If someone wants to share demographics only, that is share global on the information release. That's this option here. If someone wants to share information to the MOU, that's marking as sharing to the MOU and putting in that the appropriate information release. If it's someone who doesn't want to have any sharing at all, not even searching, you are creating that new client record when you do a project intake, and you're marking that record as restrict to org. You have to write down the client ID so you can go back to it later and know you're using the right one. And then lastly, for any type of transactions, sharing to some would mean that you're marking these particular assessments or transactions as restrict to org. And everything from protected agencies is defaulted, so you don't have to worry about it. Same thing with case notes, barriers, that type of sensitive information is automatically restrict to org.